Paul Harrell, weekdays from 4 to 6. Learn more at paulharrell.com.
I want to welcome to the program for the first time from the Institute for Justice. We have Dr. Dick Carpenter on the line, and he serves as the Director of Strategic Research. Dr. Carpenter, welcome to the program, sir.
Paul, it's my pleasure. Thank you.
I'm really thrilled that you could do this, and I know you are also going to be in Arkansas on the campus of UCA, the College of Business Auditorium, this coming Thursday, November 16th at 1:40, and you're going to be giving a talk on occupational licensing in Arkansas. So I would assume that this is one of your, many studies over at the Institute for Justice. And please go ahead and tell us a little bit about what the Institute for Justice does.
Sure. So the Institute for Justice, or IJ, is a nonprofit public interest law firm that represents individuals whose most basic rights are violated by government. So we are a law firm that specializes in suing the government when the government impinges upon people's rights. We litigate in 4 areas. One is economic liberty, which occupational licensing is part of that, but also free speech, property rights, and educational choice. And one of the very first cases for us was on the issue of economic liberty, where we represented taxi drivers in Denver who wanted to break open what by then was a monopoly, to break that open so they could operate their own taxi businesses in Denver. And we won. We have been continuing to win on behalf of small business owners for the past 26 years.
Wow. And that's some great work. And, you can see, that taxi cab analogy is great because, with the invention, the new businesses like Uber or Lyft and things like that, we have seen that nationwide. People they have these aversions to not going through the proper channels. You also see it with, the hotel industry and the different services out there where people can rent their own places. And so it's really interesting to me when technology kind of outthinks government. People get in there, they start being entrepreneurial, they start, making money, creating jobs, and then everyone's like, whoa, you didn't grease the right palms. And honestly, Dr. Carpenter, that's exactly the way I feel about most occupational licensing, is it's kind of, you're paying a fee. It feels kind of mob-like to me sometimes. And feel free to comment on that, and then talk a little bit about how Arkansas compares to other states with these licensed occupations.
Sure. So most people, I think, are familiar with the idea that their doctor or their attorney has a license. And I think most people generally know that their barber or their cosmetologist has a license. But I don't think many people realize just how many occupations today require a license that once upon a time did not, like auctioneers, sign language interpreters, locksmiths, furniture upholsterers, florists, crane operators, and the list goes on and on of these occupations that now require a license. An occupational license is a government permission slip to work. It means before you can go and hang your shingle out and work in the occupation of your choice, you have to get permission from the government to do so. And these licenses are created not because consumers go to the legislature and ask to be protected from unlicensed practitioners. These licenses are overwhelmingly created by members of the industry who go to the legislature and ask for the license to be created in their industry. It enables them to erect a fence around their occupation and keep competitors out. And so the costs associated with licensing, costs in the form of higher prices to consumers, fewer job opportunities, restricted interstate mobility and migration, all these costs are borne by us to benefit a much smaller group of people who enjoy an economic benefit as a result.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And, just kind of doing that in my head here, I'm thinking, well, if you're making it harder on people to practice and therefore, they can't work legally, then there's less people with a skill set that's, legally you're able to purchase or use their services. That would seem that would drive the price of those services up.
Yes. You're creating a scarcity, right? So if we think about it in economic terms, when something is scarce, the price typically goes up, and so we're creating a false, I would say, a false scarcity in the types of services or service providers that are within a market. And so by creating this false scarcity, it's basically inevitable that prices would go up on those services that are provided. And so we as consumers, we pay higher costs as a result.
So with Arkansas, because I know that's what your study is on, or one of them, can you compare us to other states? Because I'm curious about that. I mean, how do other states, when they go to license this occupation or that occupation, stack up against us?
Yes. So our study, which I'll talk about Thursday afternoon, is called License to Work. This is the second edition. We examined the licensing requirements of 102 low to moderate income occupations across all 50 states in the District of Columbia. And because we gathered all these requirements and did so consistently across all the states, that enabled us to rate and rank all of the states and all of the occupations based on how severe the burdens are to earn these licenses. So with Arkansas, what we found in the second edition was that, and we looked at three different things, I should say. One of them is we looked at the number of those 102 occupations that are licensed. So Arkansas actually licenses 72 of those 102. And that puts them pretty close to the top. The states with the most were 77. So Arkansas comes in pretty close to the top at 72.
Gosh.
And then we also measured how burdensome the licenses were. How difficult is it to earn these licenses? And when we compared Arkansas to other states, Arkansas came in sixth place as most burdensome. And then when you combine those two things, the number of occupations licensed and the burdensomeness of these licenses, you combine those two things into a single score, Arkansas came in third as most widely and onerously licensed. And that's not so good.
No, it is not. No, it is not. I mean, the protectionist crowd here, I mean, they certainly have erected, like you said, the fences around their professions. And it's just obstacles, barriers to success. So that's the way I see it. And that is really, it really just shows you how much work we have to do. And, I would point out in our current political environment, I study it pretty close. We've had a lot of people voting for different parties than we had in the past, Republican instead of Democrat, and yet we don't have the reforms that I think many of us were voting for. We still kind of have the status quo on these things. Tell us, we're talking with Dr. Dick Carpenter, okay? He's from the Institute for Justice, and again, he's going to be at UCA this Thursday. So you certainly want to make plans to be there if you're anywhere in the listening area of Conway or the surrounding cities. I would encourage you to do this because it's a report. It's called License to Work, the first national study to measure how burdensome occupational license laws are. He's going to be talking about Arkansas. That's this Thursday, November 16th, 1:40 at the UCA College of Business Auditorium. So if you can, what is the most burdensome occupational license in your study, and which is the most burdensome in the state of Arkansas?
Sure. So across all of those that we studied, the single most burdensome license was interior designer. In 3 states in the District of Columbia, if you want to work as an interior designer, you have to have 6 years of education experience. You have to pass a national examination, and you have to pay almost $1,500 in fees to the state to work as an interior designer. In Arkansas, the single most burdensome license is for fire alarm installer. If you want to be a fire alarm installer in Arkansas, you have to have 5 years of experience. You have to pay almost $1,500 in fees, and you actually have to pass four examinations to work as a fire alarm installer.
Gosh, unbelievable. That is unbelievable to me. But hang on, at the same time, though, it's like I can see with the way, people use emotional arguments. I mean, because I can just see the arguments against if we were saying we want to, that's the most burdensome according to your study, we want to make that easier. The other side, the emotional argument is, well, we're talking about a fire alarm here, and we're talking about a house fire. We're talking about potential loss of life. I mean, so how do we balance that? Because, I mean, in my opinion, I wouldn't have a problem getting rid of it. Don't misunderstand me. Or severely lowering these requirements. 5 years, that sounds ridiculous. But you know what I'm saying? We are in an ideological battle, it seems, and the other side points to these emotional arguments in some cases about potential fires and potential loss of life. So, they're going to say it's about the public safety. So talk a little bit about that.
Sure. So the word you used is correct, balance. How do we find that balance? So when the industries go and ask for a license, they will, as you said, typically say, we need to protect public health and safety, and therefore we need a license in order to achieve that. We hold open the possibility that there are occupations that would benefit from some form of government regulation, whether that's a license or some other forms of regulation that we can talk about. We hold open the possibility that could be true. But before we do that, before legislatures create these licenses, there ought to be empirical, demonstrable evidence of a significant threat to public health and safety such that regulation is necessary. And if such evidence is put forward, then the appropriate level of regulation ought to be created. For too long, Paul, we've lived in this binary world where we've thought of occupational regulation as just basically no licensing and full licensing. But in fact, there's a menu of options in between that will include voluntary forms of regulation, like voluntary certification, for instance, or voluntary bonding and insurance. And then there are less onerous forms of government intervention, like registration systems, mandatory bonding and insurance, inspection systems, certification, private cause of action. So there are ways that the government can be part of that process, but not have to impose a full occupational license or to have these severe requirements that, for instance, fire alarm installer has in order to achieve the desirable outcome.
Yeah, and then you get, and I agree with what you said there. What about the licensing rules that can be proved, that are already in existence, that are proven have nothing to do with the public safety, but it's only about the fence, around the industry, paying, greasing somebody's palms, paying homage, paying tribute, I mean, here in Arkansas a couple of years ago, we did get one regulation. I wish we'd put all of the burdensome regulations that are not about the public safety into one bill, but it was like pulling teeth to get just one out of the cosmetology board allowing somebody to braid hair. That's all they did. They braided hair. Cosmetology was saying you need 1,500 hours, and the schools in her area didn't even offer hair braiding as training. She's been braiding hair for her whole life. I mean, I've got the testimony, and it was like pulling teeth. It barely passed, but thank goodness, if you want to braid hair, that's all you want to do. You don't have to have a license to do that. Some of these are clear cut, have nothing to do with the public safety. What are your thoughts on that?
Yes, that's one of the reforms that we talk about in our report. We have a whole section on the different types of reform that could be instituted in the states, and this is one of them, where there is just simply no clear relationship between the licensing requirements and protection of public health and safety. In such cases, our recommendation is those licenses can be eliminated entirely. There may be other licenses where some demonstrable evidence exists that there is some threat to public health and safety. There is some sort of need for intervention. If so, then match up the appropriate type of regulation, like I was talking about before, to address that certain type of need.
Yeah.
So the reforms that we recommend will range anywhere from reducing the burdens of certain licenses to eliminating licenses altogether.
Yeah. I kind of feel like, and this just, dawned on me. I mean, I've thought about this before, but this really is all about risk. And I think there's some people that want to, lessen the potential risk to consumers. But I feel like there's some that want to try to eliminate it. And I don't think that's possible. And I think if you approach it from a concept of government saying we're trying to make sure, when people are out there, voluntary cooperations in an economy, in service, that nothing bad ever happens to them. If you approach it from that mentality, you're not going to have very much freedom to work.
Oh, but Paul, keep in mind that a license doesn't eliminate that. Bernie Madoff was licensed.
Oh, God.
There was a funeral director in Georgia that was pitching dead bodies behind his establishment out in the woods. I don't know if you remember that story several years ago.
Wow.
He was licensed. Public school teachers that have sex with their students, they're licensed. Licensing doesn't stop that type of behavior. And I would suggest that there are other means beyond just licensing where we can convey even greater amounts of useful information than ever before, and that is with consumer review websites like Yelp, for instance, or Angie's List, or Home Advisor, or Google Reviews, or any number of these websites out there. I can dial them up, and on my phone, I can get more information about service providers than any licensing scheme can ever provide.
That is a great point. That's a fantastic point. And I think that's where we're going to leave it. Dr. Dick Carpenter, you are the Director of Strategic Research for the Institute for Justice. I so appreciate you being on the program. And again, I just want to encourage everybody who's in the Conway area, if you're listening to this, just know on November 16th, it's this Thursday. We had is that Thursday or what's today? The 14th. Yeah. So this Thursday, the UCA College of Business Auditorium. He'll be discussing this, how it affects Arkansas, and I believe that this is all being done. The Arkansas Center for Research and Economics is putting this thing on, and so, Dr. Dick Carpenter, it's been a pleasure to meet you, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Paul. Take care.